can get like an initial take of the finance committee or a sense of the where we're at type of thing?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
And then maybe you might want to just like a Cliff Note version of the housing production plan might be a good idea as well.
Right. When,
you know,
when there's more of us here.
Not 160 something pages because, you know, that's reading a novel for the night and leave it at that.
Okay. Jason?
So my understanding of the first read of this is that this is not something we are absolutely 100% forced to do. There is a very heavy carrot and stick approach to it, but have we done an analysis? Has the town done an analysis of what exactly is at stake? Is that in the housing production plan?
Certainly the HPP doesn't currently address the MBTA because it was published before the MBTA law came out. But definitely that's, your first point is what we would like to start to outline what our role as the FinCom will be with regard to how much analysis do we want to do on this or due diligence to help, you know, provide steering to the town with regard to.
And has that already started? Has the town already done some of that, or do they want us to do it?
No, I believe that the town hall, John Mangiarotti and company have done preliminary work on that. And my understanding is that they think that it's worthwhile because of the extra funding that we get. And I think that the MBTA subcommittee or the committee that he's put together will do a little bit more due diligence with regard to what's the true risk reward or what's the true payoff versus, you know, any costs that may come about. And I think that's our role as FinCom as well, to think about and do some serious legwork with regard to what financial impacts do we think that law is going to have just by itself, and then also with respect to the housing production plans. So we can outline some of those specific questions and answers that we want tonight if we wish, and then we can have some of those ready for when we have more of the Finance Committee here next time we meet. Mr. New.
The last time I remember us talking about this, seems to me the town planning department had a bunch of questions. And I'm just curious as to whether those were asked and answered and what the status of that is. As far as what might be at risk, they kind of imply that MassWorks grants and housing choice grants and local capital project grants may be at risk. I know we've gotten significant money out of MassWorks. The other two don't ring any bells at all, but yeah. There's clearly some, and you don't know whether any MassWorks grant would be at risk or just certain ones. But more to the point is, how in the world do you implement this wonderful idea that they've come up with in terms of, you know, zoning by right, multifamily dwellings? This town is pretty well zoned. And how do you go about implementing this thing? I suppose that's one of the charges of the to be formed committee. But I would think it would be a fairly difficult thing to do.
Isha? Okay.
Nothing more to add.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a lot of factors involved that are a little bit more sort of social and neighborhood cohesiveness and things like that, which are maybe outside the purview of us as a FinCom, but certainly things we will probably add to the discussion or may enlighten the discussion a little bit, in addition to things that we think are finance related.
Well, just the other day, I was taking a walk on the rail trail down there and got to the train station, so I kind of walked around that neighborhood. I hadn't been in there in years, and noticed there was a fair amount of new development going on. And it wasn't what I would consider affordable housing.
That's right. Yeah, it's expensive
Not even
housing.
close to affordable housing.
Where was that? Was that South Acton?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Well, it says the action plan needs to be submitted no later than January 14th of next year or something like that, which isn't a whole lot of time, quite honestly, given that we're just starting that conversation.
Right. Yeah, the whole thing is very short, sort of short order, right? From the time they pass the law to the time they give you to do each step of compliance. Pretty quick.
Mr. Chairman, can I take advantage of the fact that we have a select board member here to ask him just how far down the path conversations have been made?
You may ask. He may or may not answer. Welcome, Mr. Martin.
Hi. So the town manager's working group will eventually provide some detail to the select board for, us deciding on what to submit for a report. Up until even earlier this year, detail was still coming in from state regulatory agencies, interpreting the law, if you will. So it's becoming more clear. It was kind of fuzzy in the beginning. There are also some things that are still, I haven't heard the final resolution of. There are some ways that you can put some of the zoning further than a half mile away with providing transportation and things like that. And the detail there is not clear to me. So that's one of the evolution things that's happened since the law was first passed.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Quick favor to ask, since you have more sway over town employees than we do. I'd love to get a feel for just how well received this is Commonwealth-wide. If most towns are clamoring to hurry up and jump on board and sign up and submit their plans, or how many towns are going, wait, this is faster than we're prepared to move? Is there any form of relief? If possible, could you help facilitate getting some feedback about other municipalities around the town, around the Commonwealth, to see, just how well this is being implemented, and or how fast and or slipshod this is being put into play?
Well, I think, so there's been some things like in the Globe about certain communities, I'm forgetting which ones now, maybe one of the ones that begins with W, that they're, vehemently opposed, to it, and they may just not do it. But I think no one is, getting in ahead, right? So we won't know until, kind of the day before the deadline or the week before the deadline to see how many communities actually go forward. But I'll see what information I can find out.
And do you have a go, no-go date in mind?
I know the dates are early next year, or so there was one date that was in May of this year that we had a formal presentation to the select board. That was a required step. The next deadline, I think, is in the first quarter, and that's what the working group, that the town manager's working group is working on, is what to present to the select board.
One last question, and then I'll try and close my mouth. If indeed it's a January deadline, as Isha just said, how do you feel about 2 months to make a decision on this topic?
So I should have probably reviewed some detail because I knew this was on the agenda. I'm forgetting, each of the deadlines is a step in the process, and I'm forgetting actually which step is the first one next year. So like the one in May was a pretty innocuous step. So it's just making sure that we were aware, really. And I don't think the next one is the final step. But anyway, I'm not absolutely certain.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
I
feel like this is a fairly momentous thing that the town has to decide, and it feels like an exceptionally compressed calendar.
Yes.
And, thank you, Mr. Chair, for joining the working group, but sounds like the working group has a lot of work to do as a group
So
in the near future.
I think we would have to have something on next year's town meeting warrant.
Yeah, because that's a zoning change, correct?
Right,
Which
it is,
requires.
all this is a zoning
Yeah,
change.
so.
Right, and then market forces work out the rest.
So it's really irrelevant what the select board decides, it's what town meeting decides, is that correct? Do you have the ability as select board to change
So
zoning laws?
with the exceptions of citizens petitions, the contents of the warrant is the select board's agenda, right? So it's, the select board builds the warrant, right? So we would decide, and we vote on every year, what articles are in the warrant.
Right, but
So-
the select board themselves can't change zoning.
No.
Right.
No, the select board can't appropriate money or change laws, right?
Right.
Those are town meeting things. So,
Okay.
but we would propose what goes in the warrant.
Okay.
And, realistically, the town meeting can't choose between infinite options, right? Because it's too big a body, right? And so there'll be one option probably, which is yes or no for town meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Thank you very much. Any other comments from the Finance Committee? I will just close by saying, it seems to me that the MBTA law, should we choose to comply with it, will certainly be a positive for the housing production plan, because it will most likely put in production more affordable housing, which will help out in that regard. So go ahead, Roland.
But that's if a developer wants to take that on.
That is true.
Right, we could say, oh, we have this, and a developer buys a lot that's within a half a mile of the train station, right? And decided, well, I'm not going to do that. I can build 3 big homes on the lot, or 2 big homes on the lot. Say it's an acre, because it's an acre of 15 units. And he said, I can make more on that 2 big homes than I could on affordable housing with 15 units.
Mm-hmm.
So you're the developer, what do you do? Well, of course, you go for the ones that can line your pocket the best.
Right.
That's human nature, and that's it's a business cost, really, when you think about it.
So it may not necessarily be a positive impact for the housing production
It
plan.
might not be any impact at all.
Yeah.
It might just we've enacted these laws, but, the intention may be good for the MBTA to have these laws, but what's the reality?
Okay. So moving on to the sewer bylaw and ARPA funding, this is on the agenda as a result of some comments received to the Finance Committee from citizen concerns, and also a comment that was made, citizen concern, to the Select Board in a meeting that I attended. And I felt that the citizens' argument was very compelling, and I think Steve and I both discussed it a little bit and decided, yeah, it's probably something we should at least talk about in a FinCom meeting and get a sense of the Finance Committee's thoughts on whether or not we have any kind of purview or whether or not we want to change any recommendations that we've made. The gist of the argument is that the sewer bylaw, as it's written, really states that all of the costs of the sewer should be borne by the sewer users and not by taxpayers. And the gist of the argument is that, well, ARPA money is money that's available for the entire community, and thereby using it for the sewer perhaps violates that. Now, the town legal counsel did weigh in on the question, and they have decided that there is no, conflict there. I believe you all were copied on the initial citizen concerns on this subject. So I'm happy to have a discussion and let you guys tell me what your thoughts are.
What percentage, and maybe Mr. Martin would have to answer this for us, what percentage of owners, property owners, let's take commercial and residential, are on the sewer versus not? In other words, if it's
Boy, Mr. Martin, you are the spotlight tonight. Thank you.
I think it's roughly 10% of the town. Not absolutely positive about that, but I think it's about 10% of the town.
So it's a pretty low number.
Yes, and indeed, no general fund money has been used for that. except for public properties that are within the district paying for their own access to the sewers.
Thank you. So, given what Mr. Martin just said, maybe we have another number of public properties, you know, that the town owns, and take the percentage of that, of what the funding was, and just use that percentage. I don't know if that's feasible or not, but I mean, that's just an idea.
So are you saying with regard to the, I believe it was $500,000 that we recommended that the town should use from ARPA for the expansion project of the sewer, perhaps that should be reduced to a figure more in line, or a figure of the percentage of the total ARPA money?
No, I'm just saying, so the 500,000, right? And say the public pieces that are tied into that are, I'll do it in a, you know, using round numbers, round figures. So say it's 100 properties that are tied into the sewer system, and 5 of those are municipal, public, you know, schools, towns, whatever. Then take that 5% of the total 500,000 and have that as the figure, because that represents what the taxpayer would have to pay. And in that way, it's equitable, you know, because again, I agree with the proponent on this one in a way that you're taking money that's really designed for the whole community and you're using it for to benefit a specific group and not benefit the citizens as a whole.
Mr. Noon?
Well, I can see that point, but not every dime of ARPA money benefits every citizen of the town as a whole. Famously, money is being given to the school district, and we know that about 24% of the households in town have kids in the school. So, the tricky part of this one is that we have a sewer bylaw that specifically states that the user should pay they paid for the original construction and they paid for the ongoing maintenance. And it's been our practice that, expansions, once again, would be paid for by betterments by the new user group if they chose to approve it. So it's a pretty tricky question in terms of where do you draw the line on allocating ARPA money? I have read all the Treasury guidelines. It's totally up to the Board of Selectmen to allocate ARPA money. It doesn't say if there's a bylaw against it, they can't do it, but the money is awarded at their discretion. So I could see where town council might say, there's no argument here. They can do what they want with it. On the other hand, it's a relatively small group of people that will be served by this. And if we pay for the design of an expansion this time, are we going to set a precedent that we're going to walk all over the bylaw in the future, or only when we have money from somebody else, or how's it going to work?
Mr. Cole?
This is definitely related to sewers. It's not necessarily related to ARPA, except that I did ask the town manager with regard to the new sewer possibility towards the AHA project on the Walker site. I asked how many other parcels would be touched by this. And he said there's only one, and that they would choose not to assess a betterment. How is that possible?
Mr. Martin has an answer.
So betterments only apply when we borrow money. Betterments are a means to pay off a loan. That's all. And so if we don't take out a loan, we don't need any betterments. So there are many places that we've done this, right? We've pushed the boundaries of the school, the district a little bit, or somebody has taken a larger parcel which was assigned a lower betterment, which they've since paid off. But when they use it for a greater purpose, like put in more units or something, they pay a privilege fee. So originally, the privilege fees were the same dollar value as the betterments. But there's been inflation and stuff. So now we have a privilege fee of $14,000 for a one-bedroom unit, adding $8,000 for each additional bedroom in the unit. So a two-bedroom house or condo would be $22,000. So anyway, betterments are only to pay off loans. If you have no loans, there's no betterments.
So the proposed project to feed to the AHA building, that was not the full cost of the sewer, right? That was a portion of the total cost, correct?
So we have traditionally, and way before me, not assessed privilege fees to affordable units.
I'm not talking about the affordable unit, I'm talking about the abutting unit.
Oh, they would pay if they hooked up.
They would pay if they hooked up, but they would not have to pay if they chose not to, because why? My understanding is that the way betterments work, if it runs past
there's
your
no
property.
betterment because there's no loan.
Again, so my question is, for that project, that $1.5 million was the entire cost of the entire sewer?
So,
I don't think so.
yeah, so if there's no loan, there's no, that's all I can say on that, right? So if there's no loan, there's no betterment.
So they would have to have finished the balance of that project out of
Right.
operating costs.
And also it matters whether the sewer pipe goes in front of their property. If it doesn't, for example, if the pumping station that we would put in for the AHA project, the McManus project, has enough capacity to support the public safety building. But the pipe currently doesn't go to the public safety building. If it doesn't go to the public safety building, it doesn't pass in front of anybody's property anyway. So even if we took out a loan, there is no betterment.
Until you hook up the public.
No, only if we took out a loan for the sewer
Understood.
system, right?
Understood.
And that doesn't even have to be a loan taken out in the context of the sewer system, right? When the public safety building's septic system fails, they either have to build a new septic system or hook up to the sewer. That's on them. The same way that if anybody who wants to hook up to the sewer system, you know, we had some of this development in South Acton you guys were talking about just before the meeting. They had to run the pipes to hook that up from the new houses.
So in this case, it's only one, so I'm not going to spend too long on it, but I definitely want to understand. Thank you for telling me that it's all about whether or not we take out a loan, but that makes a difference because there's multiple projects that are being discussed.
Right.
2A1 goes down a bunch of people's parcels.
If we expanded the sewer district based on borrowing for that expansion, it's the sewer pipes, actually, not even the plant, the sewer pipes, based on a loan, then we would have to assess a betterment in front of that. But we haven't done that, right? Since, you know, we talked about doing it a couple times at town meeting. Town meeting decided not to do that, so we've not done that. But we have allowed certain other people to hook up, but it's on their dollar. Wait, let me give you an example of the one that the project is currently on hold, but the Powder Mill Place, right? That project is paying for the pipe up 62 and then up High Street. That's on them. But that infrastructure then becomes the town infrastructure, but there's no betterment because we didn't take out a loan to put in that pipe. But anybody who hooks up there would pay a privilege fee, even though that runs through by a dozen properties.
So I have a question for you, Mr. Martin. If there are additional repairs or, you know, servicings that have to happen for that section, who takes on that? Because then it becomes part of the town's infrastructure, correct?
Yes, so the sewer enterprise fund pays for all that.
Right.
And every so often, the select board, acting as sewer commissioners, reassesses the sewer rates to make sure they're enough to do the maintenance on the existing sewer system. Right, and that includes, town meeting approved having a rehabilitation project for the
Right.
20-year-old pumps and infrastructure in the wastewater treatment plant. We took out a loan to do that. That loan is paid off by the sewer ratepayers, not by general fund taxpayers.
Okay. Thank you.
Roland?
Don't sit down.
So that's where my comment was coming. My example was, Steve, everybody pays for the schools. Every taxpayer in the town of Acton pays for the schools, but not every taxpayer pays for the sewer. It's only the users of that. So that's where my comment was coming from. So in other words, ARPA was not just given for the users of that sewer system, it's given for the town overall. So that's where, maybe we could, that $500,000 can be used for something, other infrastructure that benefits everybody more collectively as a whole.
Okay. Mr. Noon?
Well, I was just going to ask Dave one more thing.
We sure do appreciate you being here, Mr. Martin.
We do, actually. I'm having trouble getting my head around this. This pipe is supposed to go from South Acton to the AHA site on Main Street. And I keep trying to do the numbers in my head, and I keep finding it's much more than $1.5 million. It's probably $1 million a mile to bury the sewer pipe, and I think it's more than a mile between those 2 points, and it's probably $500,000 to put in a pumping station. So is this all coming out of ARPA money, or?
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, the funding would be some combination of grants and the money to build the McManus project, right? So let's take the sewer out of the equation. They have to probably spend about $1.5 million building a septic system.
Okay.
Right.
So it's avoided costs.
Maybe it's a little less, but, they have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, we'll say, to build a septic system. So part of that money, I don't know what the final financial arrangement would be. So the final financial arrangement is not done. The engineering that we had done for that, though, doesn't have a normal gravity sewer pipe, though. It is a high-pressure sewer pipe under Route 2.
Great.
It's drilled under Route 2. Yeah. And drilled in such a way that we don't have to stop traffic or anything. It's like drilling a well, except sideways. I haven't gone and looked at it myself, but the engineers say that that's fine.
Not going to hang it from the Bruce Freeman.
No, actually, then you'd actually, that is a potential solution. You do have to size it, though, to allow for freezing, right?
Yeah.
It'll freeze. Well, there are pipes, I think, maybe they're water pipes, I'm guessing, that go there, but the water probably moves enough that it doesn't freeze.
Probably wouldn't freeze, actually. Thank you.
Isha, did you have more comments on this topic?
No, I had the same concerns as Mr. Noon, actually, so I think Mr. Martin's comments address some of that.
Yeah, and so my sort of recollection, and when we voted to recommend that the town use some of that ARPA money for the sewer expansion, was that we were gauging all the projects in the works on a number of factors, and one of them was, that there's not really money available at other places for the project. And I think that was kind of where that project fell under the categories. And so I don't know if with just 5 of us here, if it's worth discussing whether we think we should change our recommendation, or even if we have sentiment to even change that, or should we put this on an agenda for another time?
I would recommend we put it on an agenda for time when we have more members here, I will bring up one argument. I haven't heard it lately, but I've heard it many years ago around new sewer capacity or areas that, because we are a town that gets our drinking water from the groundwater, that the more we expand our uses of sewer systems, the better our groundwater will be, and that we all have an interest in that. Everybody on the water, at least on the water districts, water has an interest in that.
Any other comments? Okay. So let's move on to the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District and School Committee E&D Policy. Subsequent to our wonderful multi-board meeting a few weeks ago, one of the school committee members said to me, why don't we have or why doesn't the FinCom have a specific E&D policy the way that we have a free cash policy? And to that I said, well, would it be helpful? And the school committee member felt that maybe it would be. Maybe it would help in the decision-making process for both the school district and the school committee. So I wanted to bring this back up to the Finance Committee as to whether or not we want to explore coming up with a specific policy for their E&D, or whether we should let them spend it and keep it as they like within the legal limits that they are already required to obtain. So that's open for discussion if anybody wants to make comments.
Sure. They have an upper limit of 5%. That's state regulation. Lower limit, what we want to see out of the town is 3%. They have often been below that. My concern is always that we may be the majority partner in the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District, but we're not the only partner. And I don't know that you can have a E&D policy that is weighted by the interest of the two towns. If we say 3%, and the Boxborough FinCom says 4%, what's the number? You multiply ours by 84 and theirs by 16, you get to a number that if they want a guideline, fine. I'd give them the same guideline we give the town, 3% as a minimum. But I don't know that maybe it'd be an interesting exercise to work with the Boxborough FinCom on coming up with a floor, but in and of it, ourselves just doing it, I don't think it's a wise thing to do.
Other comments?
I agree with Steve. Maybe we should reach out to the Boxborough and see what they think.
Mr. Cole?
First of all, I'm surprised that the ABRSD wants us to weigh in on this. In the past, they have not wanted any outside guardrails, suggestions in any way, shape, or form. They've wanted to stay as autonomous as possible. So first of all, I'm surprised by their request for guideline. Then,
Well, it could be just the opinion of one individual. Keep that in mind.
fair enough. But my other comment is that if I'm reading that one individual properly, they're trying to make the distinction that we are double reserving. And do we believe that argument holds water in any way, shape, or form? That since the E&D is a form of reserve and 0.84 of it came from Acton sources and 0.16 of it came from Boxborough sources, that by making them hold a reserve in E&D, it's a form of double reserve because we're holding quote unquote Acton dollars in E&D and we're holding reserve dollars in free cash. Do we give that any credence? And would they feel fine with us saying they should feel free to go down to zero because we'll always have their back? I don't think they'd like that answer, because I'm pretty sure rating agencies want to know what their reserves are when they go to take out a loan. Because while S&P and Moody's may care if the tax base is solvent and sound and capable of bailing them out, I don't believe, and I could be wrong on this, I don't believe that S&P and Moody's are going to take the town of Acton's and the town of Boxborough's ratings solely into account when an independent agency of the ABRSD takes out a loan to do whatever, replace Conan, fix up the administration building, whatever their next task is. So, I'm surprised that they want us to weigh in when I believe they have their own responsibility to meet their own rating agencies' requirements.
Isha? No? Mr. New?
Well, the double counting question comes up a lot. If we established a policy, or better still, if they established a policy with a 3% floor that they wouldn't go under, yeah, we could conceivably give the town side some relief, but it wouldn't benefit the school system at all. So to me, the double counting question is moot. I mean, they make the point, but it wouldn't do them any good, because Jason points out it's their reserve position that the bond rating agencies take into consideration. And they also take into consideration the financial strength of the two towns that represent the district. And to that extent, the better the town of Acton's reserve position is, the better off they are in going to the bond market. So it really comes down to what do they want to do. They could easily adopt a 3% floor, 2% floor, whatever they want. They, over the years, they preferred to maintain their flexibility, meaning they can use it to plug a hole in the budget in a bad year, and then they put some money aside in a good year. When you establish a strict policy with a floor, that becomes, you take that tool away.
Okay. Thank you. Isha, you were about to say something. Did you have a comment?
No, I was the only thing I was concerned about was what would happen if there was some sort of a conflict. And so I'm assuming the school budget committee has their own sort of standards or rules. And very often, I know we have sort of suggestions, but they aren't always required to adhere to them. If in fact we propose something and we could spend hours coming up with the guidance, but if it's in conflict with the school committee budget, the school budget committee's sort of own recommendations or something like that, then what's the way out, It kind of, I think, sets us up for a difficult situation. I'd much rather that the school budget committee came up with their own recommendations about how to be fiscally responsible.
Okay, excellent comments. Anything else? Mr. Martin wants to make a comment. Yes, please.
So this is a comment just as a resident, and not anything else. So the E&D reserve really, in my view, covers two things, right? It covers enrollment, which is greater than projections, so that they have enough money to run in case, the projection AC system, roof caving in, something of that nature. I believe that those two things can be covered with less than 3%. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 2%, or maybe even a little bit of a smaller value. The school system, the school district does borrow for capital, but not the big capital. The big capital is borrowed under the town's borrowing authority. Anything that's in a major renovation, anything that's a major renovation or building is has to be passed, is under each town's borrowing authority, and has to be approved directly by the town's voters. So, and all those big things too, they're excluded debt. It's direct debt. Things like vehicles, that kind of stuff, if they borrow for those, that's on the school district. So I think there's a different nature of things there. So anyway, I think something less. I don't think what I'm saying is I don't think free cash and E&D are the same thing.
Mr. Martin, I believe that we just took out a $90 million loan for the Boardwalk campus. The loan is the responsibility of the ABRSD. The debt exclusion was the responsibility of the residents of both towns. The debt is the responsibility of the school district. It is not the responsibility of the town. The exclusion allows it so that the town does not run afoul of Prop 2.5. The legal entity that took out the loan is not the town.
No, I understand that, but the interest rates on the loans and things like that on the big projects is based on the ability to pay of both towns. Whereas when they take out a loan to buy a dump truck or whatever they buy, right? That's completely on them. It's a different thing.
I believe that we had to get a S&P ruling on the fiscal health of the ABRSD, not on the towns, when we took out the building. You were in the same room as I was.
Then we have a different understanding. Anyway, I've made my comment, and so.
No, thank you. It's actually very helpful.
Well, let me just
Mr. Newt?
clarify. Yeah, the debt is issued by the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District. In the rating agencies looking at that debt and how creditworthy it is have to look at the underlying fiscal situation in both towns, because the school district has no ability to tax. They only have the ability to assess. So when we do an override, what we're saying is we need to get out from under the Proposition 2.5 limits and exclude that debt.
But the rating of the entity in question when we took out the loan is the ABRSD entity, which fortunately both were AAA at the time. But remember, it wasn't that long ago that the ABRSD was, what was it, double A minus or whatever it was?
They got dinged by, I think it was Moody's, once or twice because they didn't have enough E&D.
And when we take out the loan, it is on their rating, not on the rating of the town. So while the rating agencies may look at the underlying capabilities of the towns to pay for it, the interest rate will be based on the rating of that entity, not on the rating entity of the towns.
Okay, now we got three different opinions of the same.
Can I complicate it by throwing in my opinion, which would be that.
You have a good one?
Well, understanding what I know about rating agencies and lenders, they're going to give you the interest rate that suits the least common denominator, right? So if the school's rating is AAA and the town's rating is B-, they're going to get a loan at a B- rate. That's my opinion, and it's worth every penny you just paid for it. Okay. So, my sense or understanding of the request or the comment from the school committee member was that it might make their process easier if they knew they had a floor that they had to stick to for some reason. And I actually appreciate Mr. Martin's comment that, maybe their floor doesn't need to be 3%. But, it still begs the question, is it the FinCom's role to tell them what their bottom line E&D is that they shouldn't spend beyond? Or should it really be up to them? And I think this is a discussion that we should table for another time when we have more members here, especially when we have our school committee liaison here. And we also have an ALG meeting coming up this Thursday at noon, I believe. So we'll have a chance to talk more with the school committee members at ALG about that. We can ask them for a little bit more guidance on that, exactly what they think might be necessary. Go ahead, Mr. Noon.
While we're on that topic, one of the things, perhaps the only thing on the agenda, is a debrief on the joint meeting that we had a couple weeks ago. So as one of the ALG reps, if anybody has any comments they'd like to make about the meeting, what you thought about it, whether you thought it was useful and what you learned, I'd be interested in hearing that.
Would you like to hear that now, or would you like people to send that to you?
No, let's talk about it now.
Okay.
It's the day after tomorrow.
Any comments on the joint meeting?
I thought it was useful, particularly to hear the points of view of the Box Pro FinCom and Select Board. I think I haven't had the opportunity to really hear their positions. It was instructive to see where all of the committees were aligned and maybe what some points of dissension could be in the future. So yeah, I thought it was incredibly helpful.
Jason?
I think it's a great thing to do. I think it helps in making sure that we get all the right people in the room, but I'm not thoroughly convinced it's as productive as it could be because it's a public meeting, because it's being recorded. I felt that many people were holding their punches. I think while I'm all for making sure that all decisions are made in public and that we're not hiding anything, I think that sort of having the conversation about what irks one person versus another is not well served by such a large meeting. Anytime you get a meeting of over 10 people, someone's gun shy about, clearly not me, but someone's gun shy about sharing their personality, sharing their opinion. So I understand that it has to be a public meeting. I understand that this is all deliberations, but I would love to see some small batch conversations amongst the different boards, because I think that's where a lot of the open, honest, frank conversation comes to play. And then you air your honest differences in public meetings.
Roland?
I think it was worth us to attend. It was good to see the new school, so we know what we're spending our taxpayer dollars on, so to speak, or the regional district is. It was good overall. I'll leave it at that. I mean, I agree with what Jason's saying. It's kind of hard to, to get the opinions and to have more constructive conversation. It did show to, I think, that we were well prepared as a finance committee when we went in there with our point of view. And, we're good.
Can I add to what he just said? Shout out to our member, Christine Russell, for knocking it out of the park and doing a fantastic job with the presentation. I think she represented us very well during that meeting.
I concur.
Certainly better than I could. We do appreciate that. We do appreciate her. Okay, yeah, no, I thought it was fantastic. I think it's really important to get a lot of people in a room who all are stakeholders in a specific project, and everybody got to at least voice an executive opinion, let's put it, right? Which I think is important for each member, each stakeholder to hear the position that each of the other stakeholders is in. But absolutely, it is difficult to get a more natural conversation going in that setting. But I also think that the more you have meetings like that, the more comfortable people become. And so maybe that will become a fruitful sort of setting in the future. Steve, you look like you want to say something.
Many years ago, we used to have joint meetings of FinCom, Board of Selectmen, School Committee. It never involved Foxborough. But they were geared around a question, as opposed to just different people giving their points of view. It was, one of them I can remember very well was, well, what are we going to do about health insurance for the employees? And they kind of put us into groups, little working groups. You've all been to these meetings, break into small groups, one from FinCom, one from the Board of Selectmen, one from the School Committee, and, come up with answers to these questions, which I don't know that we ever accomplished much, but it prompted a whole lot more dialogue. Clearly, this was the first one of these, and this was not the time and the place to go about trying to solve joint issues. But it's an idea about how to maybe organize another one now that we've all met each other, know where we stand. How can we work together on common issues?
Excellent point. Isha, any comment? Okay. That concludes the ABRSD E&D discussion. So Finance Committee business, we do not have any minutes to approve at the moment. Any liaison reports?
Health Insurance Trust met, I think on the 27th of October. We had a presentation from Blue Cross Blue Shield on pharmacy benefit management, and we reviewed the results we had, which were still reasonably favorable, though not a lot of months involved. We will get the October results soon, and at our meeting on December 1st, we will attempt to come up with preliminary guidance on rates for next year.
Okay, thank you for that. Nothing else? So our next meeting date should be the 22nd of November. Same time, same place.
I believe that's 2 days before Thanksgiving,
Should we move it?
possibly. I'll be in town, but you might want to make sure you have a quorum check before you send out that agenda, Mr. Chairman.
That's a good point, and the week after that is not good for me, but I'm sure Mr. Noon would love nothing better than to chair a meeting if we had one. Okay, so duly noted that our next meeting date is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and we'll do a quorum check and also verify agenda topics beforehand. Some of the topics we wanted to talk about tonight really require more than simple quorum, and I could foresee us running into the same problem next time if we do the meeting on the 22nd. Okay, and with that, Ms. Gangali, I will accept a motion.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Thank you very much.